And man, today is a good day because we're hanging out with Eric Allen and EA. It's been a busy offseason for the Silver and Black.
Yes.
But before we get there, it's great to see you, number
right.
one. And dude, you're like the mayor of this building right now.
No
we've tried
way.
to do this show 13 times, and every time someone's got to come in, say hi to EA, dap you up. I mean, it's good though. It's an exciting time of year, and people are excited to have you back in the building. And I'm on the top of that list.
You know what, Eddie, man, you're the man.
Oh.
And whenever we're in April before the draft, I mean, football-wise, you're excited because it's the possibilities. We had a successful playoff season last year. But everywhere you go, if you're a Raider person, fan, or whatever, people are excited. And I think, me being back in the building again, it's just great. Sometimes, you really don't appreciate, like, how great this place is until you leave. And then you come back and you're like, these facilities, again, I mean, just unbelievable. Where I came into this league and had to work out in. And seeing what these young men have is just incredible. And then you guys are just the best. Seeing all the faces of what makes this thing go, man, you guys are awesome. So I'm happy to be here.
And throw in the fact that the draft is here in Las Vegas too, which adds a whole nother element of excitement and enthusiasm and looking ahead to next week. It, like to your point, is a very, very exciting time to be a fan of the Silver and Black. And we talked about at the top, man, it's been a busy few months for Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler.
Yeah.
I mean, just going down the list, and we're not going to do the full list, but it's Chandler Jones, extending Max, extending DC, Davante Adams, adding this crop of free agents. I mean, it has been an incredibly productive time. I think that is the word that comes to mind for me. It has been an incredibly productive time for Dave Ziegler and Josh. And I think that when we look at this team now, compared to the team that they inherited when they got here in January, this is a better football team.
Oh, without a doubt. On paper, it is. And you have proven commodities. You have players who, again, you talk about offensively, and Josh has seen it and done it all. Right, he is so versatile, and as a play caller, as a person who's getting ready for a game. And I think the one thing that you think about when you mention Josh is situational football. That's the one. When you talk about the Patriots, you talk about situational football. Being versatile, being able to attack whatever defenses. And then you have Derek Carr, who, we love the fact that he's, sold and here in Las Vegas, winning quarterback. You bring Devante Adams in, along with Waller and Hunter. Offensively, I mean, you have some players who are at the peak of their careers. And they're just so exciting. To be able to look at this roster and say you can basically do anything. With Josh healthy at the end of the season, playoff teams have a team that has been to the playoffs, knows what it's like. I think we're in a really good spot right now. Hope is really high right now.
And we're going to talk about Davante Adams in a minute, because I know that one of the reasons you're here is you had a fantastic conversation with him earlier today that we want to know just a little bit about, before we debut it next week. But EA, do you think that there was an element, and Dave has been pretty consistent in this, saying that, hey, we have a plan. We came into this situation with a plan for this offseason, for next offseason, for the next, for the lack of a better term, the 5-year plan. But do you think any element of that plan was perhaps tweaked or kind of fast-forwarded, and there's a sense of like, the AFC West is crazy. Like, we have to figure out a way to compete. We have to figure out a way to get stud players into this locker room if we want to make a run at this division.
Well, that's a great point, and you have to move in a direction that's aggressive. I think aggressive as far as the front office is concerned, the last 2 or 3 years have been rewarded with championships. Look at what the Buccaneers did. Look what the Rams did. Right now if you're aggressive, you are in the category that's going to be a winning type of football team. It's not hey, we're going to draft this guy and it's going to be 3 or 4 years. The fan bases are just not willing to wait that long. So you have to have an initial plan. But when you can take out the quarterbacks, when you can bring over a player who may be, one or two, Davante's top 1 or 2 players, if we take out quarterbacks in the National Football League, when you can bring over a player of his caliber, to the AFC West, which is, I mean, I was thinking about it. I'm not sure if there's ever been a division with the type of quarterbacks, the type of players, offensively skilled players, defensive pass rushers, ever. It's just really hard for me to kind of Mahomes. You have Carr, you have Russell. It's just the amount of winning and leadership that is at the quarterback position is unrivaled. And Raider-wise, you have to find a way to put yourself in the mix. And I think they've done a really good job of. There's a lot of new players here, and it's going to be a lot of great competition. And that's really what it's about.
And the Davante move is going to get a lot of praise, as it should. But I think the totality of what Dave and Josh have really done over the past couple weeks, months now, since the start of the league year, I think that at this time next year, when we look at the complete picture, the kind of mosaic that they built, I'd be like, oh, okay, this was a good one. I know Davante was a stud, but this was a great move. They're kind of going down the list of making this team better. But obviously, the Davante move, an exciting one that got the fan base in a fervor, I think is fair to say, and one that I think really kind of set the tone for what this organization wants to be in 2022 and beyond. To your point, you get one of these studs, one of the premier offensive players in the NFL, and he's in this building now. That changes everything that you want to do on that side of the ball, especially with Josh McDaniels at the helm. But I know that you talked to Davante earlier today, and I'm not going to ask for all the secrets here. I really won't, because this will come out, shameless plug alert, early next week on Raiders.com, Raiders YouTube, all that stuff. So make sure you check EA out, doing all his things. But what was kind of your takeaway from that conversation? Had you had a chance to meet Davante before that, or was this the first time?
No, this is the first time. And Eddie, I tell you, I was very impressed. Doing your research when you're going to, interview one of the big time guys in the league, you have to kind of, take a week or so and chew up some other interviews, look at him on tape, and kind of find out what kind of player he is. But man, I was really impressed with the overall package. And I think he's really a throwback type of player. We started kind of talking shop, after, you get through what your draft situation was like coming out of Fresno. And, he kind of ran it down to me that way. But we started talking shop. And, man, he is an incredibly sharp player. He's like a surgeon. And he really takes his craft seriously. He understands, his position in the league. And he's trying to maintain it at a very high level. He's he's almost kind of a cool football nerd in a good way, and talking about routes, talking about releases. And I told him, I was like, my son's going to be a senior in high school, and so the rave the last 5-6 years is in the football off season, all these high school players, they're on 7-on-7 teams. It's like AAU basketball, and they travel. They're in Vegas. They're in Los Angeles. They're in San Diego. They're in Arizona. They're all over, and you go to these tournaments, and there's teams from Florida there. There's teams from all over the place, right? And they're doing this little hop, skip off the releases, the receivers. And, for the last couple of years, I was like, what the heck are they doing? This is just because it's 7-on-7 and, it's all skill positions. It's all because of Davante Adams and Doug Baldwin. It's this basketball type of release for receivers. So just like, you imagine Allen Iverson crossing guys over, making them fall. And when you look at, even Hunter does a little bit of that. It's kind of this pacing that they're trying to attack the cornerback with to mess up his alignment, mess up his leverage. It's just, and he kind of goes into detail and explains a little bit and just about the receiver position and what it takes to be a dominant guy. Just a great conversation, man. It's just really eye-opening that guys are still willing to put in that type of work to be great.
And still learn.
Yes, and still learn. And, of course, he mentions the relationship with him and Derek. It's something I didn't know. They were like throwing in the offseason because they lived close together in Danville up until like 2019. They couldn't do it when COVID hit, but they were still working because I was like, hey, I know like the relationship and the chemistry between you two is great because of Fresno, but you're going against the best guys in the world in the league. How long is it going to take for you? So I'm trying to throw all these questions out to him. Hey, man.
Hard hitting EA.
Yeah.
Journalist EA coming to the party.
Yeah, and he's like, E, man, we threw up until 2019. The only thing that interrupted was COVID, and kind of, we're back at it again. So, I mean, this job gives me the opportunity at times to sit down, with Max, with Derek. This is another really, I think, eye-opening, good interview, and then hopefully people can see that at the end of it, it's just two, football players talking shop.
I don't do this very often, but I think I might ask Steven and Peyton for the sneak preview. I'm gonna be like, yo, I'm not gonna wait till Monday or Tuesday of next week.
Right,
I need the director's cut, stat.
You can get it too.
I think so. I think I know a guy.
Yeah.
But one of the unique kind of wrinkles now of getting Davante is that first round pick and that second round pick don't exist now for the Raiders this year.
Yeah.
And we could talk about the haul and kind of the trade and the assets that were exchanged, and I think the Raiders did pretty well in that regard.
Yeah.
But the reality is now they don't pick until number 86.
Right.
So we were talking about before we started rolling here, where there's a unique nature to this draft and to this draft class now for the Las Vegas Raiders.
Right.
And I don't think that anyone would say that, hey, the 2022 Raiders are done. They are a complete team. Like, at this juncture, everyone is trying to get better.
Yeah.
Now, keeping in mind that the Raiders aren't going to be on the clock now until 86, as of now, as Dave Ziegler saying. I thought it was a nice little smoke and mirrors move out of him, by the way. But as of now, not on the clock till 86. When you look at this roster, where are some areas that you say, hey, they're good, but they have room to get better?
Well, of course, you want to target the offensive line. And I think now it's about competition. It's about, offensive line, secondary. It's about competition. And whoever comes in, hopefully, understands that they're coming in to compete at those positions. And whenever there's competition at this level, it only makes it better. It only makes the unit better. So the right side of the offensive line needs some competition. It needs some guys who, want to elevate their game, want to come in and shine. The defensive secondary. Last year, we took tremendous steps up from the previous couple years, but there needs to be more competition. It's great to cover a guy, but in this day and time, it's all about getting the football. And that's one thing our team defensively has lacked. So definitely areas of opportunity there for young players. And as we saw last year, fifth-round guy, Hobbs, comes in, does a tremendous job of getting in and really competing and finding a way for him to get on the football field. So I think when you look at our football team, it's about finding guys who can come in and compete and raise the bar at the offensive line level and in the secondary, particularly about getting turnovers.
I'm glad you brought up Nate Hobbs, too, because, I think if you're a fan of this team, and I think that this is a little different because the draft's here in Vegas, so I think if you're a fan of the silver and black, you want to see all the pomp and circumstance, you want to see the stage, you want to see all that jazz. But you're like, it's going to be 48 hours before I'm invested in this team's on the clock.
Yeah.
But I think you have the reality of where this team is with 86 and those four picks after that.
Yeah.
But you can find gems in those areas, right?
Yeah.
We talked about Max Crosby, we've talked about Hunter, we've talked about Nate Hobbs, we've talked about the undrafted guys, AJ Cole, chief among them. Just because your name is not getting called on the first or second day of the draft does not mean that you don't have the ability to come in and contribute day one on an NFL roster.
Without a doubt. And I think for all us Raider fans who are going to miss the guy walking across early.
It's a great moment, admittedly. It's a great moment.
Great, but all you got to do is just turn on, the computer and just look at Davante Adams scoring a touchdown.
Yeah.
Like in round one when they're introducing guy, instead of looking at whoever comes across, just turn on some stuff with Davante. That's our guy right there.
Yeah.
In round two, same thing. Get him in a nice, suit or something. That's our guy, right? So you don't have to worry about, missing out because you have a proven, just absolutely beast in Davante Adams. But again, you're right. There are opportunities for our fan base to think, hey, later on, there's some guys who are going to help this football team be better. And the process to doing that is a special process. Not everyone's going to be able to continually find tremendously talented Pro Bowl, right, players, in the 4th and 5th round, and we've been able to do that. And it's not luck. There's a formula that goes into all this, and we have been on the positive end lately of that.
And put it this way, a few years ago, I'll include myself in this, I don't think you saw this fan base losing their mind when that skinny kid out of Eastern Michigan got selected in the 4th round.
Yeah.
And now, it's a credit to Max, number one, for putting in the work and doing what he needs to do to become the kind of elite defender that he is. But it just goes to show you that you never know. And there's always a little element of luck. There's always a little element of let's roll the dice a little bit and see what happens.
Yeah. It really is. And a lot of that is you have to find a way to pinpoint some players who have that chip on their shoulder. And those are some dangerous guys in a positive way when they have that chip, because that thing fuels those workouts. It fuels the late night film preparation because I was a bit too slow, or I was a bit undersized, or my measurables weren't perfect. Sometimes those guys are the ones that continue to fill that roster up as far as the All-Pros and the Pro Bowls and affect your football team in a very positive way, because that locker room is always a little uneasy as far as when you walk in, everyone's not like, hey, I went to school A, I was,
top 10
pick. I was a 5-star coming out. That's the way it goes. You got to, sometimes you walk into a locker room and it just needs to feel a little like you're looking around like, man, guys in this locker room are trying to find their way to that top stage. And Max is a perfect example of that, along with Hunter Renfrow and, Nate Hobbs and a lot of guys. Even, again, Devante is a little bit like that, 8 guys were picked before him.
I'm sure he remembers them.
He does.
Yeah.
And wait till you hear it. He's going to run it down. And so, that takes me back to, when I was, being drafted in that process. There were, 3 guys who went ahead of me. And one, Terry McDaniel, he came here to the Raiders, and I thought it should have been me. And I had a good friend of mine, and we were in a similar situation. And every time I would see him, and he played for the Cowboys and some other teams, and we'd always go, check. Whenever we see each other, we go, check, because we'd been in the league like 8-9 years, and all those guys who were drafted before us, we caught them.
Yeah.
Check. We'd always check, so it does. It fuels that off-season preparation. All the credit that you get, when you're in the league, you're still not happy with it, because you're always kind of thinking there's someone out there who doesn't think I'm good enough. And a lot of these players who are drafted later on have that chip.
Did young Eric Allen have kind of that? You talked about that. There were a handful of guys. Like, what was that kind of process like going for you?
Yeah. So my last year in college, we had some safety. We had some guys get injured in training camp, and so if we faced a team that didn't have like a really good receiver, I would play safety and kind of be the guy on top and make plays. And so I'd have to come into the box a little bit too. So I got up to like 190-something pounds. So, I was thick. I had some muscle, you know. And so combine time came around. I wasn't able to drop all the weight, so I didn't run what I would run what I ran when I was 186 or whatever. And so my draft stock dropped. And then there was some crazy rumor that I had Hopkins disease. So I'm in college, I'm getting all this information, and I have to go like to the campus health center to get a biopsy, bro. And so they're taking out a lymph node, and finally, it's benign,
Yeah.
right? But one of the teams had put that out there hoping I would drop so they can get me. It was just some crazy stuff,
Yeah.
And you think of this is 1988,
Yeah.
so there's no cell phone. Mom, it's like, hey, you got to go and get this thing operated on or whatever. So that process was intimidating.
Sure.
You don't know.
Probably just scary on a human level too,
man,
because you're like, am I good? I thought I was good. Like,
yeah. So, going through that process for me, totally different now, where you have access and people are there to kind of warn you about what's going on. And so I'm sitting in my little apartment, and I have thoughts of going to the Raiders, to the Bears, all in the first round, and I'm consistently dropping. Buddy Ryan calls, and he's like, hey, we love you. It's just that we want this tight end, and we want you, and if you can, find a way, hopefully you'll be there. So they end up drafting me, and the tight end was Keith Jackson from Oklahoma. So myself and Keith, we go to the press conference, and Buddy Ryan, he's old school as they come, right? And he's like, hey, I love you, and we're gonna make it up. So what he does is during the training camps, he releases like 3 or 4 cornerbacks. And I take first team reps, second team reps, and third team reps. So he wrote in the contract, if I started, I would get X amount of dollars.
Yeah.
And he wanted me to start, so my money would bump up to if I was a first round guy. So
that's a pro move, man. That's a good guy move.
He's looking after his guy, So I really appreciated that, but that fueled that these guys, I wasn't drafted here. This dude is on a limb for me. I don't want to let him down. So it does. It fuels you, man. It really puts that dog in you to where you don't want to let this guy who has your back, you don't want to let him down. So that's kind of what it was for me. So,
you never forget that, man.
No,
it's like,
never,
it's one of those deals too, where it's like, my wife gives me a hard time. She goes, oh, you never forget the people that, weren't super nice. I was like, no, I don't forget that.
Exactly.
No, I'm never going to forget, man. I'm petty.
That's right.
I'm petty, like big time, dog. Like if you try to cross me, like I will remember. I will remember. I promise you that. But hey, dude, man, it was so good to see you. We're going to see you a lot over the next, 8-9 days.
Yes.
It's going to be a blast. We're now diving back in, EA.
Oh, man,
we had our spring break. We had our time to refresh, get the haircut, but we're back, and I cannot wait. It's going to be so much fun. Good luck the rest of the day, and everyone keep an eye out for that interview with EA and Davante Adams coming early next week, Raiders.com, Raiders YouTube.
Yeah, for sure, man. Take care of yourself, man. Great to see you.